Sometimes I dream that he is me. You got to see that's how I dream to be.
I dream I move,
I dream I groove.
like Mike. If I could be like Mike,
Oh, if I could be like mine.
Like Mike, if I could be like Mike.
Be like mine.
Be like Mike, be like Mike.
oh yeah, I try. Just need to fly.
Just one day if I could be that way.
I dream I move.
Oh, I move.
I dream I groove like Mike. If I could be like Mike,
I'm gonna be like
like Mike.
mine.
If I could be like Mike,
Oh,
Be like Mike,
like Mike.
if I could be like Mike. Be like
In case you don't recognize by some rare chance, the greatest basketball player in history, no debate, that was Michael Jordan in that commercial for Gatorade. You recognize that? It's been a while maybe since you've seen it. That commercial debuted in 1991. It was the first commercial in a whole campaign that Gatorade was using their new star, Michael Jordan, to promote their product. The idea of the commercial was pretty simple. You probably picked up on it. I hope you did. All those kids in the video were trying to be like Mike. They were imitating his most famous, well-known basketball moves because they wanted to be just like Michael Jordan. The catchy song, right? That was written just for that commercial. I want to be like Mike. The goal, of course, was to make people want to drink more Gatorade so that they could be like Mike. That commercial became one of the most iconic sports commercials in history. Gatorade later admitted that they really didn't sell any more Gatorade because of the commercial, but that's, take it for what it's worth. But it was the tagline of that commercial that I thought about when I started reading and preparing for this message, when I read the passage that I'm going to read in just a little bit. The tagline, "Be like Mike." Because that reminded me that this Christian life that we're living, that we're trying to live, pretty much boils down to this: be like Jesus, right? It's not really a lot more complicated than that to live the Christian life. Be like Jesus in every day, in every way, in every part of our life. Our goal is to be like Jesus. Once we come to faith in Jesus Christ, we become a disciple of Christ, then day in and day out, our goal is to be a little more like Jesus than we were the day before. Sometimes we make good progress in that. Sometimes we go backwards in that. Sometimes we're kind of stuck where we are. But over the course of our life, we are to become more like Jesus. The text we are facing today in the Gospel of John, as we go through this on Sunday morning, tells us a very specific area that we're supposed to be like Jesus with. We are to love like Jesus. We are to love like Jesus. John 13 is where we are. John 13, and I want to begin reading in verse 31 and read down through verse 35. John 13, 31. Therefore, when he, that's Judas, right, from last week's message, had gone out from the group, from Jesus and the disciples, Jesus said, "Now is the Son of Man glorified, and God is glorified in him. If God is glorified in him, God will also glorify him in himself, and will glorify him immediately." Listen to this message to the disciples. "Little children, I am with you a little while longer. You will seek me, and as I said to the Jews, now I also say to you, where I am going, you cannot come. A new commandment I give to you, that you love one another, even as I have loved you, that you also love one another. And by this all men will know that you are my disciples, if you have love for one another. That was the message Jesus related that night in the upper room to his disciples. In that last moment that he would have with them before he would be arrested and eventually crucified. He only had these few hours, and one of the things that he stressed to them and to us by extension is this message: be like me in the way that you love. Be like me in the way that you love. Now, the word love is one of the most misunderstood and overused words in the English language. We throw the word love out so often and so flippantly and in so many different situations that it hardly has any meaning left. But we're going to see how Jesus meant the word, how he used the word, how we are to understand that word love, and how we are to love like he loves, and what that requires of us. So I want you to see, first of all, from the text, that there is here a mandate to love by Jesus. There's a mandate for us to love like Jesus, to love by Jesus. I want you to understand how important Jesus thought this message was. Remember, he only had a few hours, right? He only had a few hours left, and he used that time to tell them about this command to love. Of all the things he could have taught them, all the things he could have translated to us, he gave us all this mandate to love others. Therefore, he must have thought it was pretty important that we understand this. In fact, look at the word that he used in verse 34. Go back and look at 34. A new commandment I give you. A commandment. This is not just a suggestion to love others. This is not just a good idea to love others. It is not something that we can take or leave. He used the word commandment. What's the significance of that? It means we do it, right? If we're followers of Jesus and he gives us a commandment, it means that watch me, church, non-negotiable. It's not something we compromise on. It's not something that we debate. There's no wiggle room. There's no fine print. There's no exception. He gave us a commandment to love others like he does. And there's no asterisk, right, at the bottom that says, love others unless this has happened to you. There's no asterisk that lets us get off the hook. This is a clear commandment from Jesus to us to love others. Notice also he says this is a new commandment. Does that mean that this was the first time that God's people had heard the idea that they are to love others? Of course not. If you go back hundreds of years before to the books of Leviticus and Deuteronomy, you find that command, love your neighbor as yourself. Jesus quoted that during his ministry, right, in response to a question that someone answered. Love your neighbor was not new in the sense that they had never heard it. So why did he use that word new to talk about this commandment? He meant we've got to think about this in a whole different way. He says you've got to have a whole new understanding of what it means to love your neighbor. You've got to have a whole understanding, a new understanding of who you are to love in this way. You see, the Jews heard love your neighbor, and here's what they thought. I love those people that are really close to me. They are like me, they look like me, they talk like me, they're part of the nation of Israel. We have the same bloodline, the same family, the same tribe. They probably even live close to me, and they're easy to love, and they love me back. And so when they heard, in the Old Testament way of hearing, love your neighbor, that's what they thought. I love those that are right here. The Jews had a very small circle, if you will, of understanding who we're supposed to love. And then Jesus comes along and he says, I'm giving you a new commandment. And what he did when he said that was take the circle and erase it, right? He erased the circle that they had in their mind, and he expanded this idea of loving your neighbor to a lot bigger audience of people. He did that when he told one of his most famous stories, the parable, we call it, of the Good Samaritan. You know how that goes, right? A man was traveling on the road by himself. He got beat up, left for dead, thrown in a ditch. Two Jewish leaders came by, a priest and a Levite. But they passed by on the other side of the road. Why do you think they did that? Because that man was not in their circle to love. They didn't know them. They didn't know him. Who was he? Can he love us back? Can he hurt us? He was outside their circle, you see. And then what happened? A Samaritan came by. And you know that the Jews hated the Samaritans. And so the Jewish people who heard Jesus tell the story, they didn't expect the Samaritan to do anything good. They didn't expect him to be the hero of the story, but he was. He got down into the ditch, the Samaritan, and helped the man up, and at great expense and risk took care of him. He loved him like a neighbor. At the end of the story, Jesus said, now who do you think the real neighbor was there? The answer was the one who loved the guy in the ditch. That was who was showing love to a neighbor. So Jesus took the small circle that those ears were used to hearing, and he obliterated the circle. And he says, I give you a new command in how and who you're to love. What does that mean for us? Listen, church, we're about to get to the nitty-gritty. That means that we are to love not just those who love us back, but even those who don't love us back. We can't be just loving nice people and the people who look like us and talk like us and who appreciate our love and who love us in return. We're no longer able to do that, keeping that small circle. We've got to, hear me now, we've got to love the unlovely. We have to love those who are difficult to love. We have to love those who are different than us and who may not live close to us or think like us or look like us. And we love those that we think don't deserve our love. That's what Jesus was talking about. We can't just love when we get love back. That's what's new about this. Jesus even went so far in another place in the Sermon on the Mount to say that we're to love our enemies, right? We can't just love those who like us or who are ambivalent to us. We are also called on to love those who are our enemies, who don't like us and who might be out to get us. That's new, right? That's new. It's a new commandment that He's given. Now look at the word love that Jesus used. It just looks like love to us, right? Because in the English language, love is love. It just looks like the same word. But when we understand the word as Jesus used it, it will change the way we think about loving other people. When we hear love in our language, we think feelings and emotions, right? Are you with me? Feelings and emotions, and it's something that we fall into and we fall out of, and we don't have any control over. It just happens, right? You either love somebody or you don't. It's just on a whim. Well, that's not what Jesus was talking about here. That is not the love that this word is. That's not what Jesus was teaching. He was not mandating a feeling or an emotional response to someone based on how you feel about that person that day. He was not talking about something that might sweep over you and be here today but change tomorrow. Hear me now, listen very carefully. The word Jesus used here for love refers to a decision of the will. You understand the implication of that? This is a decision of the will in which I choose to act in love towards somebody. Whether they deserve it or not, whether they love me in return or not, whether I feel like it or not, whether I like them, even if they're an enemy, I choose to act in love. of what this word means. He has given us a mandate to love others. Here's the second thing I want you to get from these verses, and it's this. There is a model to love like Jesus. There's a model to love like Jesus. Look back at verse 34. Right? Go back, look at 34. A new commandment I give to you, that you love one another, even as I have loved you. Now, how many of us would have been okay if Jesus had just said, love others? But then he had to go and say, love others, even as I have loved you, even to the extent and to the degree that I have loved you. He raised the bar on how we're to love other people. He set a standard that was way higher than most of us thought. He set an example, and he modeled for us a love that is unlike anything we've thought about before. We are to love like Jesus loves. Be like Jesus, in that you love to the degree that Jesus loves. You see, watch me. The love that he's commanding, he's already been practicing. The love that he mandated for us, he has already modeled for us. He came to earth to show us what it's like to really, really love. That's not the primary reason he came, but that's what he did. He came to show us what real love looks like. He demonstrated it. And watch me, then he said, all right, there it is. I've shown you what it means. Now you do it. There it is. I've lived my whole life, 3 years in front of you, showing you what real love looks like. Now I'm about to go away, and I want you to love exactly like you have seen me love other people. It's like a teacher or a coach or a parent who demonstrates something to their child or their student, right, or their player. They say, here, let me show you how to do it, right? And they do it, and they say, all right, now you do it, right? You understand that? That's what Jesus did. He lived 3 years loving, and then he said, I'm going away, but I've shown you what to do, now you do it. It's a model, it's a demonstration. This will come as a shock to you who know me very well, but I repaired, right, got your attention. Some of you perked up when you heard me say, I repaired. I repaired a minor broken part on my car this weekend. Are you shocked? Are you impressed? Right? It was the little flapper thing on the fuel lid. You know, it automatically unlocks or locks your fuel lid so nobody gets your gas, right? And that thing had gone out and it wasn't working, and I went and bought the part, and then I came home and I was going to fix it. Now, how did I repair that? Because you know me, right? This little thing called YouTube, right? YouTube's great. I think I could do open heart surgery if I had a YouTube to follow, right? So I found somebody that had the exact car that I have. The exact part went wrong, and I watched a 3-minute video about 14 times on how to repair this part. He did it, right? Here's what you do, and you do this, and you do this. And I said, all right, I'll watch him. I believe I can do it. And I did it. And so far, 2 days later, it's still working. Are you impressed, right? There was a model. There was a demonstration for me to follow. This guy said, here, I'll do it, now you do it. Jesus said, I've shown you what it means to really love, now you do it, right? He mandated us to love, and then he modeled it for us. What does that mean? Well, 2 components to this, right? He loved selflessly. Selflessly. That means self didn't stand in the way of him loving others. He put himself aside in order to love others. He put others above himself to love them. We've already seen an illustration of that earlier in this chapter. What did he do at the supper that night in the upper room? He put on that towel and he got down on his hands and knees and he washed the feet of those disciples. He became a servant. That was love in action. It was a selfless act of love. When you put yourself aside and you serve others, loving them, not for what you get out of it, not for what you get in return, not for any credit. That's what you're doing when you love like Jesus. Selfless love. That's what keeps many of us from loving some people, is because we are not selfless like we should be. We don't want to lower ourselves to love some people because we have this idea that we're up here and they're down here and there's this great gap and I'm not going to stoop down to do that. But Jesus did. Jesus did. People will say, well, I can't love that person. I tried, but they don't love me back. That's not selfless love. That's not love like Jesus. That's selfish love. If your idea is you're only going to love the people who love you back, that's selfish. That's not what Jesus did. Jesus said, watch this, if you love those who love you, what credit is that to you? Even lost people do that. That hits you pretty hard, doesn't it? Right? If you only love the people who love you back, that's what lost people do. Anybody can do that. You're called to a higher standard. You love even those who don't love you back. That's selfless love like Jesus showed us to love. He loved selflessly. He also loved sacrificially. A little bit later that night, Jesus would say to his disciples, talking about this sacrificial love, he said, greater love has no man than this, but that he lay down his life for his friends. What was he talking about? The cross. That would be in a few hours, right? Why did he lay down his life for his friends? Because he loved them. It was a sacrificial love. If you want a model of sacrificial love, look at what Jesus did. He died. He took upon himself our death, and he died for us. Look at 1 John 3:16. We know John 3:16. Look at 1 John 3:16. We know love by this. Ears perk up, right? About to show us something. We know love by this, that He, Jesus, laid down His life for us. Hey, that's a good verse, but look at the rest of it. And we ought to lay down our lives for the brethren. We're not called to die in somebody's place like Jesus did, but we're called to love them sacrificially, which means dying to self, right? That's what he's saying. That's the ultimate demonstration of love, is that Jesus sacrificed himself for us. I wonder sometimes, I'm speaking to myself, when I have a problem loving somebody, if that verse would not pop up in my mind. That'd be good. I'm having trouble loving somebody, not an emotion, an action. Having trouble acting in love towards somebody. I'm just not going to do it because of fill in the blank. I wonder if this verse shouldn't pop up in our mind by the Holy Spirit. Here's real love. Jesus laid down His life for you. You ought to do the same for others. You ought to do the same for others, right? Surely, Greg, surely all of you, that if Jesus died for us, showing His love, surely we can love others, even if they don't love us back, even if they've hurt us, even if we don't like them, right? Pastor, they don't deserve that love. Neither did we. They don't love me back. Neither did we love Jesus back. Pastor, they did this to me. What have we done to Jesus? You see what I'm saying? Loving like Jesus requires us to be selfless and sacrificial. We have a mandate to love. We have a model to follow. Jesus said, there, I've done it. I've showed it to you. Now you go do it. One more thing. There is a message to love through Jesus. There's a message to love through Jesus. Why is it such a big deal for us to love as Jesus loved? Well, He tells us that in verse 35. Look back at 35. By this. By what? What does this in verse 35 refer to? This in verse 35 refers back to verse 34 where He says, love one another as I have loved you. By this, loving others like He loves us, all men will know that you are my disciples. It's not an afterthought Jesus gave us here. This is important. One of our most powerful witnesses to the world is how we love others. You understand that as the church? Do you understand that as a follower of Jesus? That one of our most powerful witnesses to the world is how we love people in the world. There is a message to the world in how we love like Jesus. Now, we have to vocalize the gospel to the lost world. We have to be able to express it in words so that they can hear and repent and believe in Jesus. All of those things are true. But we also, hear me, church, must testify to Jesus and the gospel in how we love other people. That's a powerful witness. When a lost person sees us loving unlovable people, people that are hard to love, people that don't love us back so that we get something out of us, when the lost world sees that going on, they take notice and they see Jesus in that. They see Jesus. They know something is different about us. When we love selflessly, right? This is not about me and what I get out of it. This is for the benefit of somebody else. When they see us love sacrificially, I'm going to love you no matter what it costs me. They see Jesus because that's how He loved. That's not how the world loves. Watch me. Why does the world take notice of that kind of love? Because that's not how the world loves. You know how the world loves? It's all about emotions and feelings, and it's here today and gone tomorrow, and it carries me along on a whim, and it's not something I choose, it's something I feel, and I'm in it for what I get out of it, as long as it doesn't cost me anything. That's the world's idea of love. Listen, you want to see the world's idea of love, find somebody that will love you until they are not getting anything out of it, and then they're gone. That's the world's idea of love. It's all about me, and then me. That's the world's idea of love. So when the world sees us loving in a way that's totally unlike that, they don't think, oh, what a great fella he is. They think there's something different about that person, and on investigation, they'll find out that to be Jesus. They'll find that to be Jesus. Because that's why we do it. We don't love like that because it makes us feel good. We don't love like that because we're just good people, because we're not. We love like that because of Jesus. And He said, by this, all people will know that you're my disciples. It's almost like Jesus is saying, even if they won't listen to your words, they'll see your love, and then they'll listen to your words. Missionary Oswald Sanders said, we can preach, we can pray, we can give, we can serve, but if we can't love, we have accomplished nothing. We need to do all those things, but we have to love too. Paul wrote in 1 Corinthians 13, the love chapter. I heard it at a wedding ceremony yesterday. He wrote in 1 Corinthians 13, verse 1, I can speak with the tongues of men and angels, but if I don't love, it's just like a clanging cymbal. No point in it, right? It's all in how we love others. History shows that the pagan world pays attention when we love. You go back and read first century history. Christians had a reputation in the years just after Jesus lived. Christians had a reputation for loving people that were not easy to love. Christians had a reputation that was well documented outside the Bible by secular historians that said, these people are different. We've never seen anything like it. We don't know what it is about these people who call themselves Christians and part of the way. There's something weird about them because they just love everybody. They love the lepers that nobody else will touch. They love the little infant babies that the pagans throw away to die. They take them in and love them. They love people that nobody else wants anything to do with. What is it about these people? It's Jesus. We need a revival of that kind of love in the church through us to love people like Jesus loved people. If we want to change the world, love them, give them the gospel, show them Jesus in everything that we do and how we live. Love the world, give this message about Jesus through the way we love. Back in the ancient days of my youth, we sang this little ditty of a song. It was written, kind of came out of the I think the folk music era of the late 60s. This would have been in the 70s that we sang this little song in youth choir. It was cutting edge then, John. Cutting edge. You remember? They'll know we're Christians by our love. By our love, by our love. They'll know we're Christians by our love. Simple words, right? Not a masterpiece, but a message that reflects what Jesus said. All the world will know who you are by how you love. Let me ask all of us, does the lost world, people you hang out with, the people you friends with, work with, go to school with, go to ball games with, does the lost world around you know that you're different, that you're a Jesus follower by the way you love others? I want you to think about that. Do you love like Jesus loved? As much as we'd all like to be like Mike, right? Be much better, wouldn't it? To be like Jesus in the way that we love. I want you to stand with me. Close your eyes, bow your heads. Music is going to play. I just want you to do a quick self-inventory of your heart before we go. Just think about that love factor in your life. How do you love others? Are you kind of got a small circle? Is it kind of small in that you're very selective in who you love? There got to be certain kind of people that got to love you back, or is Jesus obliterated your circle? Do you love selflessly and sacrificially? Do you love like Jesus? You love like Jesus. Maybe you're here today and you can't love like Jesus because you don't know Jesus. Not